Going to be a great time because we're talking about mental health and community impact. As the days grow shorter and colder, I think it's really important to, kind of tackle something like this, sort of a stigma that is all too common these days. And I think that we're going to create a really great space here for some good conversation. Building resilience together. And I think this one's actually a really key point that I want to keep kind of coming back to in the conversation, because all of them kind of lead to the idea that we need to be resilient against what is to come. And there's no better way to do that than in community. Go ahead and get us started. I want to thank the people who are here for joining us, and everybody in the audience for listening along. Let's get into some mental health and community impact. I want to, for our introductions, just kind of, speak about who we are and why, maybe a little bit of why we feel connected to this particular subject. We're just going to go ahead and go down the list, which means Miss Reverend Deborah, you are up first.
That's what I get for being at the top of the list, huh? Being early. Thank you, Tripp. And I'm really excited to be here again. I love these panels and I love the lovely folks that you've got in them. So thank you for hosting them. My name is Reverend Deborah. I'm an interfaith minister, a movement facilitator, and shenanigan shaman, apparently. And I have been working toward building community in a variety of ways for a really long time, including living in different ones and conceptualizing of how we can essentially get outside of the box that we keep trying to recreate. When we keep okay. So, hi, that's me.
I appreciate that a lot, my friend. Thank you so much. Meep, I hear that you have tonsillitis. I'm so sorry to hear that. How are you feeling?
The throat is sore, but I am surviving and I am here.
I appreciate you stopping by for some wisdom. I know that you take a lot of time in the past to talk about men's mental health. In June, I believe it is men's mental health. And so that's one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on this panel, as kind of a balancing perspective. So thank you for being here.
As a Gen X person and raised by boomers, we were taught that men don't have mental health. That's the way that I grew up, where we weren't allowed to have feelings. We were raised with that toxic masculinity that everybody likes to talk about. If you fall down and get hurt, rub some dirt on it and all that. And that's not the norm anymore. Through learning with other people and being in and out of relationships, I learned to get in touch with my inner self and discover what true mental health is, especially after being in and out of the mental health system. It's been quite a journey. And I'm very interested and willing to share all the conversations we're going to have this evening. Awesome.
Thank you again for being here, my friend. Miss Jessica, I really appreciate you joining up with us. It's been fun really stitching that video, and I have more to come, I think. I'm running out of steam, but thank you for being here tonight to talk about mental health and community impact.
Yeah. Hey, it's actually Jessie. So I'm not sure. My parents thought that would be better than Jessica. But I'm Jessie. I am usually in North Carolina, and I have worked at small nonprofits, large federal nonprofits, doing mostly environmental work. I worked for 10 years to get environmental justice integrated into social work education. My background is in social work. I've got my
we may have some connectivity issues.
And then I was in PhD program on the East Coast. Oh, can you hear my sound at all? Hold on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me back now? Okay.
Yes.
Where did I leave off?
You just cut off on your background.
Okay. So my background is I worked from everything from small nonprofits where you have to do everything, be a multi-utility player, to large nonprofits, federal nonprofits, where you can see the structure and how that goes. I've taught community organizing and social welfare policy, as well as environmental justice for community organizing at the graduate and undergraduate level. And I have kind of bounced around between working on political campaigns, seeing that there's a political industrial complex, a nonprofit industrial complex, an academic industrial complex, and kind of jumping from one place to the other to say, okay, maybe I can make a difference here. And now I'm like, oh, it's overlapping. They're intersecting to keep it this way. So I have a little bit of a background from a bunch of different places.
Right on, right on. It's like you've seen how the sausage is made, and I appreciate you being here for this conversation for sure. My friend Tony
Thank you for having
has absolutely. My friend Tony has made it in. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend. I hope you're well today.
I am so well. Thank you for asking. Sorry, I'm putting my phone back up. I had to go get myself some water for this evening. You guys know how I feel about water. Thanks for having me up. It's great to see everyone in the panel. For anyone who doesn't know me, I've done political commentary on TikTok for a little over a year. I've been in the community organizing space, not-for-profit space, and nonprofit space for, I don't know, 6, 7 years, almost 10 years, but community organizing, events. I'm a small business owner as well as a father, and I am a huge, huge advocate for mental health, more specifically self-awareness and accountability. And that's a nutshell that I could probably take the next 3 hours to unpack. So.
Well, thanks for the brief description, my friend. We'll go ahead and get started, get on into this. So this is most of the wonderful panel. We have somebody that's going to be joining us here in about 20 or 30 minutes. So we'll get them in, kind of folded in the conversation when they are added to. But I think that coming from our various perspectives is going to be a really interesting one for today's conversation, because there's so many different elements that kind of play off one another. There are the ideas that, like, for at the very top, the idea that mental health issues are something that are a lot more common. And I think that the millennial generation especially is one of those that kind of broke the barrier, broke the silence on that, to be like, hey, the kids are not okay, man. And like, I need to go see somebody about this. And so like, and I'm grateful for that, because it's opened up, avenues for conversations like these and others where, it's important to understand that it is still a unique experience. Like, I've broken down in very unique ways over my years and like been rebuilt myself. But just because my experience is unique doesn't mean it's not uncommon. And so I think that's really important to, like, first and foremost, realize that within the community members that you have amongst yourselves, like either whether it be boots on the ground or even like an internet community that you've crafted through like minds and stuff, that struggle is still very much together. Like it can be a shared experience if you're willing to open up and talk about it. So very first and foremost, we have to break the stigma and like let people know it's okay to be talking about this kind of stuff. And so on that point, I just kind of want to open the floor to anybody who would like to speak. Go ahead and just let me know. Anybody got words? I can vamp if I need to. Come on up, Tony.
So being in the political space for a long time, I feel like I just want to get this out of the way. I've tried to engage with people about overarching industrial complexes and why that affects every single United States citizen, regardless of which party you affiliate with, or if you're religious or not, no matter what your gender or sex is. None of those things will separate us when it comes to certain issues that repeatedly get put on the back burner, even though they do unify most of us. And what's really interesting about that particular conversation is that what I've found when I'm having that dialogue with people is I'm not actually having a political dialogue. I'm actually walking through a whole bunch of trauma and limiting beliefs with that person. Propaganda is a hell of a drug, and none of us can escape its wrath. We have to be very careful as we maneuver the 21st century in this digital format, right? And so the conversations that I often have with people aren't about geopolitical affairs or the histories of nations or declassified documents. Like, it's rarely about that. And I'm mostly walking through people's biases, encountering my own bias when I meet a worthy debate opponent. And that to me speaks to something very concerning, which is our relationship to ourself and one another is severely depleted in this day and age. I think it's great that Tripp brought up the millennials, because I've been looking up a lot of stats on millennials, and about 22% of us, as of like 2019, about 20 some percent of us claim to have depression. A little more than 25% it was anxiety. And so it's about half of us are claiming to have some sort of, or to be dealing with some sort of mental health diagnosis. And deaths from, or, unaliving from substances had gone up 108% over the previous decade, which tells me that there's a lot of us not talking about it. And why does this connect to politics? Because here's the common thing. Most of them are feeling these ways because of loneliness and money stress. Those are the two. For an overwhelming majority of my generation, the millennial generation. And let's speak to loneliness. What happens when we're isolated? What will we believe? What can make its way in here and then fundamentally change our neuro-linguistic programming, the way we view and talk to ourselves and interact with the world? I feel like there's a whole lot of vulnerable people, and I'm sure it affects multiple generations. I'm just speaking from my own experience here. And I think it's really, really crucial that we speak about mental health and we destigmatize not only therapy, but all the modalities that have actually helped people. So we don't feel so alone, first of all. And two, maybe we can start to normalize the experiences, because when we do that, maybe to bring it full circle, we start to realize that it's not just that my brain's broken and my parents weren't very cool. Maybe there's some industrial complexes that have roots so very embedded deeply into our psyche and our persona that it's fundamentally affecting the way that we live our lives. And so to me, addressing mental health and just putting it out there for one another and sharing our experience will destigmatize it. And to me, hopefully allow some of those things to bubble to the surface so we can see, oh, wait, maybe it's not these other hyper isolated things that we like to talk about in therapy and with a psychiatrist. Not that those are bad or wrong or anything, but those are very hyper specific to me and my lived life. But what happens when we start to cast that net out wider? There's a lot of us going through it. And I think it's just really, really crucial to have these conversations publicly. And that's a side effect that I'm hoping to see, is that we discover that it is the state of our world which has fundamentally changed our mental health, not necessarily trauma and broken childhoods.
So I can jump off from there if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So part of what I have been trying to do, as an 18-year-old kid, I thought, you know what? Studying the history of social movements as being one of my focuses sounds like so much fun. And I didn't realize that knowing about the history of the labor movement and all of these atrocious things now would be so helpful in the times we're living in. And so I've been trying to figure out how we got here. And part of it is, I remember as a kid, there being so much shame around any mental health stuff. And I remember my mom saying, you can't go see a therapist because if you ever want to get a job with the government, they never hire you. All of the stuff that we were taught as millennials was keep that underneath the rug, brush it underneath the rug. And when it got to the point where I could no longer put that mask on, I remember telling my mom about some of my diagnoses and her just crying and saying, what did I do wrong? And there's so much stigma baked into what mental health means, not realizing that the nervous system, your body, if it doesn't feel safe, if it chronically feels unsafe, it will stop making serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine. So focus, mood, circadian rhythms, going to kind of mess everything up. But starting to talk about that with people, I remember probably early 2010s being upfront about my diagnoses and being really scared. I was like, I don't know if you'll want to spend time with me anymore. I don't know if you will want to be my friend anymore. But I remember talking about it, and there have been more than a handful of people over the course of my life that said, you are the first person who talked openly with me about mental health issues. And it got me to go see a therapist. One of the people I talked to started a forest school for her neurodivergent kids. Like, there are so many instances where just being upfront about it and removing that shame, because that shame is a lot of what is keeping us stuck. And in politics right now, in organizing, a lot of what they use to motivate people is based in shame, fear, and anger. The last 5 years, I've been working on the ground, doing ground organizing for environmental and racial justice and equity organizing. And I'm seeing it pop up in the interactions I'm having in the community where they have a lot of trauma, but it's not being addressed. And when they get activated or triggered, people don't know how to navigate that, because a lot of the communication skills we used to have from existing in villages together, having more people around us, like, that might get into intergenerational wisdom later, but we've lost a lot of those social skills and emotional and relational skills. So that's part of what I'm seeing.
It's true. And I'm going to go ahead and piggyback off that and say that we have been far removed from things that have worked for us in the past, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't learn those things and revitalize those techniques. One of the things that Tony and I kind of kick back and forth about is the idea of Kiwanis and Rotary and all these other types of clubs that, we remember when we were kids, doing real community good in the communities that we existed in those days, and how it really feels like, and if you look at the actual numbers of who is still members of those existing clubs, there's a definite cutoff, and there's generations that are just missing, when there's part of this conversation, I feel, alongside, forming these community support systems, is revitalizing our peer group to be more interested in it to start with. And I think it's the want is definitely there. We're all just sort of directionless and we don't really know which way to take it. And so the idea that there was a disconnect between previous generations showing us that, intergenerational wisdom, that this stuff matters and this is the reason it does. For one reason or another, it got lost in communication. And so that's one of the things that I think we need to kind of maybe start turning the perspective towards, and kind of showing that over and over again that these things are necessary. From there, I would like Miss Deborah to come up and talk a little bit about her, the way she handles the mental health and things, and the way she tackles it as a shaman, if she doesn't mind.
I did see Cupcake Dude throw his hand up. Did you throw your hand up?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I can.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, we'll go ahead and.
You okay? I
ahead.
wanted to offer my generational wisdom here.
Word.
Some of the questions that people had, like Mr. Tony was talking about, what's the difference between now and decades ago. And we're discussing loneliness and communication differences and all that. As a person who's a little older, before the internet, that's the problem. And this is a hill I'm willing to die on. Social media is the problem, 100%. We no longer know how to communicate. It is so easy to say things like, I love you. It is so easy to say things like, I hate you. It is so easy to say everything on a keyboard, behind a screen, hidden, and no consequence. And there are good consequences and bad consequences for all of our actions, except when you're behind a keyboard, there's no consequence. So one person blocks me, there's a billion more on the app. So I make one person upset. Who cares? It doesn't bother me. And even I fall into this myself, being a creator on here. I have plenty of people who do not like me. I have plenty of people who love me. And the people that don't like me, I don't care about their opinion. Does that make me a better person because I'm strong enough to handle their hate? Or does it make me a bad person because I am not willing to change to conform to society? these are some of the issues that we run into. And communication is a lost art. It is a lost skill. People don't do it anymore. A lot of people like the text messages with emojis and shorthand and all of that. But to really get down and to talk to people about feelings and emotions and know somebody on a personal level. Tony, when was the last time you shook somebody's hand? Like, for real?
People, and I go way out of my way to do that. So I mean,
that's why I asked you, because I know you.
Yesterday. Big hugs,
See?
long hugs, nice words, authentic speech, handshakes, eye contact. I like to be with human beings. Yes.
And now if we ask the chat or other members of the panel the same question, when was the last time you went out of your way to be nice to a stranger? I do it all the time. Every time I go into the store, Kate loves it when I go into Walmart because I'll sing to make people smile. I will walk up to a perfectly strange lady and say, you know what, in case nobody's told you, you are beautiful today. I love that hairdo. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I watch a stranger, light up and smile. And sometimes it's a little embarrassing for my girl. Sometimes she gets a little embarrassed because I go a little over the top sometimes. But I'll do whatever I can to make another person smile because you never know. That one hello, that one handshake, that one hug could save a life. And that's the teetering that we are on as a society nowadays, that a simple hello could save a life. And that scares the shit out of me, bar none. So we need to get beyond this social media, as it were, and much like Tony and I'm sure many other people, is to take a moment and share that love with everybody we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you're right.
Okay, I'm done with my rant.
I'm popping on. And I do believe that you are correct in that the internet has caused a very big social wave through all of our, through our entire perspective. And it is something that needs combating. The fact that, there is there's a couple of different lanes. There is that, the anonymity online will lead to more reckless behavior because, you will face no consequences. There's also the idea of echo chambers and the fact of being filtered into a lot of like minds into like sort of an echo chamber to a point where you feel like the whole world thinks that way, even though it's only like the select amount of people that are within the circle. And because of that, when we go and have real world, outward interactions, we end up having a lot of disconnect and issues with, with communicating in the same way, because like some of us feel more comfortable, and maybe this is probably definitely a generational thing. Millennials and Gen Z alike probably feel a lot more comfortable expressing their true selves online than they do out in the real world. That may be programming and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's like part of the larger key. But when someone comes through with genuine compliments, like it really does make a ripple wave of difference. Like I am personally like paid to be nice. I'm a buddy tender, so it's customer service facing job, but I genuinely enjoy it. And yeah, it's the compliments on like the person's style or something that they can control that like hit the best. And so that's one of the things that if you just choose to do that, just, random compliments, radical acts of kindness, as some people call it, like you can genuinely change a person's day without even knowing it. And I think that's a real important part of like, if especially if you've gotten that at least once in your life and you know how good it feels, then like propagating that for other people, like I'm of the mind of like being default to do that anyway, but I just think that it's really awesome to see like the wave of that happening more and more. Reverend, are you ready to speak? All right.
Oh. Hi.
Hi.
You had a little prompt for me. What did you ask me when you last time?
It was about how, like, through the shaman aspect and idea of mental health. I know that spiritually, it comes a little differently.
Yeah. Honestly, really, I see it as one and the same, and the reason why, the reason I do what I do is because I have walked hand in hand, right, with spirituality all of my life and religion. And it's been a really important part to me because of mental health. And because it was one of the places where I could safely explore concepts outside of, how do I even, because it wasn't like I was talking in therapy to my priest or anything, but kind of, yes. It's one of the few places where we're allowed to say, I might be broken, I'm scared, I'm not sure, I'm confused, I feel lost. It's one of the first places, right, where we might go when we do feel lost. There's so much to say on this topic. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna take just a brief pause, because I want to organize my thoughts, and I've been writing notes here about so many aspects of it. Because there's the larger how this came about, right? I think we've talked about, I know I talk a lot, and I probably said it last time, about the energy body and how we developed and how the personality develops and ego develops and mental mapping. Our entire personality and understanding of reality all gets developed in those first 5-ish, 7 to 8 years. We don't even, like I said before, we don't even come online. Our brain doesn't come online and fully out of theta brainwaves until we're 8. That's called the enculturation process. And from all angles, that is coming in, and that includes the spiritual process. It includes the concepts about mental health or not, and about our role and our position in the greater world, as well as in our families and in our homes and whatnot. I think the biggest thing that we need to be considering is that the enculturation process is broken. That if we hope to change anything, that one of the most important places to focus is with the children and our spiritual practices, because those are lifelong things. No matter how much we rise and fall through our lives, what's one of the few constants that we have? Our beliefs in something higher, right? Possibly hoping for heaven someday or what have you. But that's a slippery slope too, because the current structures we have in many ways can add to the stigma or add to mental health concerns, issues. It brings me back to the Ring of Gyges. Did I tell the story of the Ring of Gyges last time I was in here? I don't want to repeat myself. Okay, so the Ring of Gyges is a philosophy, right, story. It comes from a conversation with Socrates and somebody else, and essentially there is a kingdom in which there are multiple flocks and shepherds that manage those flocks. And so every quarter or so they come and they bring their flocks to a meeting where they all gather together and talk about, what fields are good and what's not, and they all do their stuff. On the way to this particular meeting, there was one of the shepherds took a nap beneath a tree. And of course, upon waking, he finds a golden ring just laying on the ground beside him. And he thinks, what luck. So he picks it up and he notices a little inscription, and he places it on his hand, and he looks at the inscription and continues on his way. Everything like normal. He makes his way there, and in the meeting, they're discussing not the easiest topics. So things get a little heated, and they're definitely in argument at this point. And in his frustration at feeling like, they're not taking his opinion, whatnot, he sits back and in frustration, he rolls the ring. When he rolls the ring, he rolls the inscription to the inside. And as soon as he does, they turn away and they continue their conversation as if he was never there. And this, he thinks they're ignoring him. Now he's like, oh, now they're really jerks, right? Like, ah. And so more frustration, he rolls the ring around. And when he does, the inscription comes back out, and they look back at him and ask his opinion as if he's been there the entire time. The kicker being they never notice when he disappears or comes back. It's always been that way either time. Realizing what he has, the story goes on to explain how he usurps the kingdom and steals the king's wife and takes over everything. Because the question is, without consequence, would we still choose moral, positive, good actions, or would we just go ahead and do whatever we felt like doing? And that goes to what Cupcake was saying, about anonymity online. To a degree, we have lost our that responsibility because there's not accountability. I see the larger structures in the culture and in religion that have sought to prevent those kinds of things from happening. We've got to give them structure. They're wild beasts, these humans. We must give them structures and boxes to live in and rules to follow. If they do not follow the rules, then there must be broken, something's wrong with them, and we have to, right, push them out of the good pool of people here. Unfortunately, it's exclusive. There's not a lot of spaces in this culture, in the traditions here, or religious, some religion, yes, that pull people back in, that say, you're struggling, come closer. Let me sit and listen. And instead it's, oh, and more and more and more so, right? Again, also with the internet stuff. I'm also with you there, Cupcake Dude. I've been watching marketing manipulation since the 90s, and have seen it progressively get worse and worse. And I was absolutely in the 90s on the train of like, honestly, the video games are not as great as you think they are. I think they are really actually causing us issues. So, yeah. I can pause there. I've got so much to say.
Well, thank you. That's a great point. And I have a couple of jumping off points. Because when it comes to what came to mind is the idea with like no consequence. It immediately made me think of video games like Fable, like the Fable series, and how there is that idea of like, you know, in a video game, you have no consequences, so you can do whatever you please. And there's still some of us that will choose to be like the good guy. And like, I've recently watched a couple of interesting videos about how, like, when you look at the stats and the data of the people who play those types of games, it's like 80-something% of them will actually choose to do good. And so like, there's a whole like there's a whole psychological deep dive done on that I'm not going to get into here, but there's that idea of, you know, the making the choices regardless, maybe, you know, a bunch of words. So, but no, basically my point being is that when we have ourselves the opportunity to do anything that we want to, more often than not, at least those of us, I believe that there's good in everybody, and you know that will prevail overall. But we can give ourselves more reason to act through, you know, for moral reasons or what have you, if we're connected into our community and really engaged. Because the idea is like, if you know Bob and Jill down the street and they've like fallen on hard times because like, you know, their apartment caught on fire or whatever, and like, you know, you're gonna try and rally around them and kind of, you know, build them up and help them get back on their feet. Like that was a lot more common when I was a kid than it feels like it is these days. So that's part of what I'm talking about here when we're talking about the connection between mental health and community impact, because like, you know, if you know your neighbors and you have those experiences with them that craft like a really good relationship, then, you know, and it can be reciprocal, like that, you know, you get what you give in and that sort of deal. So like all of that is incredibly important. But I saw Tony drop Bill Hicks's name in the chat. So I kind of wanted him to come up and tell me what he meant by that, my friend. What'd you mean? I think I know what you meant, but go ahead and explain it for the folks.
If I say the actual bit that Bill Hicks does on people who are in marketing, this live will get shut down immediately. So let's not do that. So let's not do that. But I will add, there's a whole bunch of things that we start to bump into when we start to discuss mental health. Because so when someone framed depression and anxiety as, you know, ruminating on the past or fearing the future, and what it means to have your body feel like it's in danger all the time, and what that does physiologically to your blood pressure and the neurochemicals coursing through this dome of ours, it starts to change the perception of what mental health is as like some bug. We imagine it as like a bacteria, something wrong, wires crossed in a brain. Like the average person isn't looking at this in like the 4D. Like they're not looking at this in like not only me, my genetics and the way I was raised, but the world within, you know, the world within which I was raised. Is that grammatically correct? Why did that feel weird? Anyway, and so not only are we talking about that, we start to bump into the meaning of life, because this is sapping our joy. This is sapping our will to connect. And what happens when we don't connect? We don't form coalitions. We don't form groups, new ideologies, new third spaces, monuments for no reason, giant fucking statues. Why? Because it looks cool. Okay. And we like it. We like the picture of the thing we just made. Like, great collective human achievement just it isn't going to happen anymore. And it affects friendships. It affects love and romance. It affects family stability of all different varieties. Like, this is an existential issue that I feel like is just being sorely misrepresented in a lot of social media, where people can self-diagnose themselves, and we're looking at the DSM-5 as if that is, like, in totality the only way we can view our personalities, our mental schema. Like, that's just like a way, a useful way for many people, and it's helped many people, but it's not like the only highway to a solution. And it's really frustrating to see how many people didn't make it through their 80-ish years all the way because they couldn't take it anymore. And it's so rarely that it's like emo music and razor blades in the shower and like weeping and cursing the name of God. Most people are just freaking tired, man.
Yep.
They're tired. And
Absolutely.
it's existential. And I think it gets to the core of what we always talk about, and then I'll land the plane, which is community, communication, like communion with human beings around you. It is the answer. We need each other. We need that interaction. We need that oxytocin, and without it, we're not going to make it. I'll land the plane there.
Well said, my friend. Jessie, I saw you raise your hand emphatically. Why don't you go ahead and come up and speak some words?
Yeah. So oh gosh, where to even start? I am going to get a little bit sciencey just because a lot of mental health is looked at as a personal moral failing of some sort. There's something wrong with you, that you can't fit in with this system. And I did a deep dive on how do I operate? Why am I the way that I am? And how did I get this way? But also in the context of historically, like, what created the system that we're in? And your neuroception is in your subconscious. It's what kicks your brain into fight or flight. It's what tells you that you're not in danger. And even with therapy, most of the modalities that we use right now are based in retraining your conscious brain to tell you that you're having unreasonable, like, your thoughts are not rational. This worry is not. But if you're not getting into the subconscious and your body isn't feeling safe and your body's always, and there's always going to be that dissonance, and all of the modalities that actually help you get reprogrammed out of fear are actually, they've looked at EMDR, hypnotherapy, all of these techniques as pseudoscience. And so that's where I'm going to leave that. But some of the ways to get your brain out of that fear are connection, fun, imagination, creativity, play. And you see, they've taken third spaces away from us. They've taken arts out of schools. They have taken away our parks and our ability to come together. So, sometimes you wonder, is this by design? So rewiring your brain has become harder, and keeping you stuck in fear and shame keeps you in survival mode.
Absolutely. And to the point, most free third spaces have kind of gone a little bit a ways away. We're actually covering third spaces on January 7th. That'll be the next live panel, just so y'all know. But to my mind, I can think of libraries, and there are still parks. That's still an avenue. But other than that, I think cafes and bars, which usually, they want you to buy something in order to be there. So there's that kind of price barrier. And when that, then there's a whole conversation, like, it is a third space, but it's not the same kind of third space that can really, like, cultivate a good community. Now, on the last panel, we had my friend Squashy come up and talk about how he would sit and draw at the bar and became kind of a fixture there for doing that kind of thing, and would have, like, people, and, like, he crafted a community around that sort of deal. And I thought that, that's a really fun thing. As long as, people who go to the bar are, in for that kind of thing. And like a good hobby group, that could go a long way. Like the idea is your community could be anything that you want to craft, whether it be, I know my friend Miranda talks about, just combining two different friend groups that you have, like the place that you work at now and maybe like the place where you went to school, or, the people you do yoga with, something like that, and getting them all together for a meal. Like that's participating in kind of growing and cultivating community. It's like giving an experience to you and your friends that will, like create memories and, maybe create a few like stronger connections. So from there, I want to actually kind of dive into that idea of what we can do for in a community sense. Like what kind of ideas, what kind of sort of support systems can we really expect to revitalize in this day and age? Because I think it's really important that a lot of us are looking for a sense of community, but don't know where to find it. And so the options that are available, religion and others, are not necessarily a bad thing, but like there needs to be some form of like revitalization, I think is a really key part to it. And bringing that to an idea of, our generation seeing it as cool. Tony, go ahead and come on up.
I was like scribbling something so fast, and then you said that I felt like I was like finishing my homework as the teacher was coming to collect it. That was like a weird like flashback, deja vu. I did not like the way that just felt. Anyway, back to the regularly scheduled programming. I love, Jessie, that you brought up things that use imagination, because I've been a professional musician most of my life, well over half of my life. And although it has been a hindrance sometimes because I use it to dissociate, sometimes because I can disappear into the world of music and then all my responsibilities just, stagnate or whatever. But it's very interesting. The thing that pulled me out of my dark place, and this is in parallel to that idea of using our imaginations, connecting with people, living outside of this, because this is a prison sometimes, and we get on these loops, right? And the way to escape that is through some of the modalities that Jessie was just talking about, but also what I found to be real meditation was me noticing my body, because it gave me an opportunity to leave this place. I actually had somewhere to take the energy that was ping, 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 cycling on the same things over and over again. I had like a place to put it. And when I realized that meditation wasn't like, all righty then, it's like not the Hollywoodized, like silly thing. It's more breathing, noticing, I'm a fleshy creature. I can wiggle my toes. I can move my eyes. I can feel the way my muscles are sore, maybe hanging strangely, like just being fully present and not being attached to my thoughts as they pass me by. I don't have to ruminate on them. I don't have to anticipate them. I can just be. And it's not about silencing the mind or any of those other things. But what's interesting about that is that process gets you out of what? The thinking mind. And it has been the most eye-opening experience of my life. And I believe that it has saved my life to make that very simple distinction, that I didn't need, a subscription to JSTOR or like some like medical journal to understand. It was, I needed a reason to turn off the thinking mind and go somewhere else. And I found that in art, people, and proper meditation, awareness of my body, which that awareness of body pulls you to the moment, which is what all the Zen people will try to tell you to be. Just be in the moment, man. Well, one of the surest ways to be there is to breathe, because you kind of need to do that right now, and right now, and right now, and right now. So I like to simplify things, because when I look at bodies of science sometimes, which I'm a fan of in certain niche avenues, but sometimes it feels so overwhelming to me. I start to feel inadequate and I start to feel less than, and it feels like over my head. And then when I try to communicate it to other people, I struggle with it. It's very strange. So I try to simplify things as much as possible. And I feel like there just might be someone else in the live tonight who feels me on that, where it's like, I don't have time to do a fucking dissertation on mental health, man. And I don't want to have to understand it in these super specific ways. I want to function and I want to enjoy my life. And I want to be present with the people who are with me in the things that I'm doing and the art that I'm creating. Like I want to be here for it, And so breaking it down simply was leaving my mind to go back into my body. And music helped, and so did friends. And so did many other types of extracurriculars that I'm sure people can find on their own.
Yeah, well, and see, it's something for everybody. There's not one single path that's going to do it for us all, and that as beautiful as that is, it also can be frustrating because what has worked for me in the past, as far as like the full breakdown that I have gone through, the sitting at the void and stuff, and then walking away, definitely won't do it for every single person. It's not it's not a strong enough motivation for everybody. It was for me, and thank goodness it was. But, and so the idea of holding space for that idea that what did it for you and what did it for me are two different things, and that there are 100 other ways that people could connect. And I do hope that, somebody hears words that we speak today and comes, comes to a better understanding that it, of what we're talking about here in any sense of the word. Real quickly, we're going to turn because Miss Jennie did finally join us. Thank you for coming today, my dear. I really appreciate you. I'm going to bring you on up. Why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself, my dear?
Hi, I am so sorry I'm late. I'm actually being late as well, so there's that. Had a bit of an emergency, lots of stuff happening today, but I'm so glad I'm here. So I am a trauma and leadership coach. And I do basically work with people and organizations primarily around like showing folks how to care for their nervous systems. And that could look like in a range of ways. For example, on the individual front, the work mostly, like the format kind of resembles therapy in that it's like one-on-one, it's typically an hour. But unlike talk therapy, nervous system work is more about just like feeling the sensations, the images, behaviors that exist in your body as you're kind of responding to your environment and not like questioning them. There's a whole like process around that. And in terms of orgs, it's kind of like workshops on what it is, and then like team building, and then also the same one-on-ones I do as individuals. But yeah, I am so grateful that this conversation is happening because I also see familiar faces here because I feel like this is a conversation I've had with especially like Jessie like so many times in the last few weeks alone.
And it's good. It's good that we have these conversations are happening in different circles all at once. I think that it's important that that a lot of people talk about this in their own lane, in their own way, because not everybody is going to dig on this presentation and that sort of deal. And so but it's still it's like these things are still common enough that we can all kind of connect through the vastness of it all. Now, we've talked about some things already. I kind of want to jump back into the idea of what good community practices can look like. The idea that, because I personally am of the mind that holding events are a really great way to do it, to facilitate a space where the community can come together to enjoy. I know food and music is one of the things that Tony says is like it's a really common theme for everybody to do the food and music. But I think there's other things as well. I think that there's community-led initiatives. There's a sense of giving that space to the people, and a lot of that can be around the ideas of having third spaces in order to craft these events, and giving. I feel like there's a sense of agency that towards community that is lacking among several people, whether we look at it from a generational lens or not. Like there's just this idea of not really feeling the need to engage, to give so they can get back and that sort of deal. And in that revitalizing community spaces and healthy community practices, that's part of the key, is trying to get people excited about participating. So on that note, I just want to open the floor to the idea that what kind of things can we make that are good health practices, but are also kind of exciting, that can be considered exciting to people. I know it's kind of it's a thought puzzler, but let's try and think a little bit. Jessie, come on up.
Um, so a little bit of background. Last year, I met down with my organizers, everybody that organizes in our state, and we went through what are the barriers to getting people engaged in organizing? Who are we seeing show up? Who is not showing up? What's happening? And we saw that people are stressed beyond capacity. So adding another thing to their plate is something that just makes them want to lose their brain. So incorporating food, thinking about childcare, thinking about the transportation and accessibility, all of those things. If you can help take something off of somebody's plate that frees up space for them to be involved, that is one of the ways that we have seen a lot of success. We started a monthly activist dinner, and it grew from a few people to between 40 and 50 every single month. And another one of the barriers that most of my team is Gen Z. And they said, I think it could be cool for us to do a training on how to talk to your neighbors. So even just those very basic things, there's a lot of anxiety about how to even enter into those conversations. So that made me say, okay, let's take a couple steps back and look at what's preventing people from getting engaged. And those are the things that we started working on, and that's been helpful.
I love that. I absolutely love that. The idea that they are so honest about their questions, that it's like this is where I need to start. This is where I need the most help with. Like I love the drive of that, because like they want to do better. They want to be better community members. They just, for some reason, we don't know how. And again, I think there's a connection between the invention of the internet, because you're talking about Gen Z who's like grown up with it, like literally from the time they had cognizance, it's been around. And for some people, their parents shoved like little iPads and stuff in front of them, and we're dealing with those kinds of things. So like socializing. Because when I was a kid, millennials were part of that transition team where like I still got to like ride bikes until the street lights came on, and then I had to be home, that kind of thing. Like I got that childhood, but like some of my cousins and stuff didn't, because of stranger danger and the internet and a bunch of other things. That I think inevitably has led to some barriers in socialization, along with probably a multitude of other things. But that is one bridge that we definitely need to gap. And I think that a lot of the anxiety is this idea that people are scary, and that is it's a weird space to be in, because like you're like, okay, so not everybody thinks the same, and I like to use this as kind of a general practice, but like I treat everybody with kindness, like so it's kind of my modus operandi. I just step with the kind foot first. It's always been. And so when I go to speak to a person, there's that instinct idea that I know we're not all alike, and that I might be putting myself out there in a space that not necessarily is dangerous, but is not well received, sort of deal. And to have what some would consider the bravery to do it anyway is it's definitely an internal thing. It's the idea of like, I'm the coolest person I know personally, and I've known that since a tussle or two with the void or whatnot. And that sort of mentality, with it being innate in me, allows me to know that I'm going to be some people's piece of pie and not others. And so I'm just going to try again. But like that took a while. Like, and if I'm in a position where, like, for instance, since I have to use my social energy for work, since I'm in a customer facing job, when I am off the clock, there's a lot of times when I'd rather just kind of kick back and stay quiet and not really engage, because I get paid to be engaged. And jumping over hoops like that for myself personally has kind of been a big struggle, because like you said, everybody's tied to the brink, everybody's busy, everybody's got like, a list of things to do. And so giving them a meal is a really great way to kind of get that connection, because we all do have to eat. And so sitting down to break bread and being like, oh, by the way, this is also a space where we can connect about what's going on in our lives, and like really kind of, angle it in a way that we give them a space and something, like we break that bread with them, we sit in community with them, and we allow for just connection to be made, because it starts there. And then if you can make it a monthly thing or what have you, I think that your friend group will only grow. It's like that idea of, you build it and they will come. So it happens. And I think that it takes some people among us to do a little more, do a little extra, and finding those types of helpers in the community is a really important place to be like, to kind of start. Because if somebody's willing to go just that little extra mile, they should be like celebrated for it, kind of propped up and like, hey, this is a good thing to do. And then kind of move on from there. I mean, there's a lot of different options to kind of get those people to engage. So I don't know. It was just, that was a really great jumping board. Thank you for it.
Can I add one thing? Because there's a lot of conversation right now about anger and negativity and in the chat. Mm-hmm. And Jennie and I have been pinging back and forth about this concept of consciousness activism, where we are seeing a lot of people who are angry and in chaos and in fear, and the energy is just kind of everywhere and nobody knows exactly how to direct it. And this is kind of getting into the woo spot. But if we can come up with a vision for the collective future, what we want to work towards, using our imagination, having conversations about the kind of society that we want to live in, we can start taking some of that anger and fear and chaos and directing it into a way where we're all working towards the same goal. I don't know where I stand on manifestation or any of that stuff, but if everybody is kind of directing that to the same outcome and we're all trying to work towards that, it wouldn't feel so scattered. And there's the potential that could also help with us being stuck in fear and giving it an outlet that will help us build what we want to build.
I want to jump on that real quick. And then Tony, I saw you raise your hand, so I'll go to you next. But I want to say that there is an alchemy to that, to the idea of taking the excitement and the dread and all of the bad, the bad feelings that feel, I don't know, sporadic and intense. There's an alchemy to kind of crafting a perspective that will motivate that person towards, actionable good. I know that in the wake of all the CEO stuff that's going on, there's a lot of like class solidarity that's happening and catharsis, but like not in the best way possible. And so and I'm not saying that I have the answers to do that. I think that there are people who can, and it's a secret sauce that they own, but it's practically alchemy, being able to change somebody's emotions into something else. It's incredible, but I think that it's definitely a part that we need those sort of leaders and stuff when it comes to that in order to really kind of make bigger moves. Tony, go ahead.
I'm so happy you just said that, Jessie. I don't know if you know it, but like we're like soul siblings now, or married or something. I don't know. You just brought me so much joy. That's like my entire thesis of life is when you give someone something to look forward to, their entire state of being changes. And you see it's working so effective. As a father, I've had to do it so many times if my daughter's feeling down, like a balloon pops, which is a big deal to them. It's like up until that point, probably maybe the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And when you console them, you don't try to give them rational, like, well, there's always more balloons, kid. Like you can, but it's not as effective as, think about what we're going to do later. And they're like, later? I'm like, yeah, later's going to have some really cool things. And then they're like, wow, I can't wait till later. Like that fundamental thing is the thing that we lose into adulthood, which is why so many of us like live in this like gray nowhere land. And that's not a great place to be. It's like, when I show my music students, like, here's something you can do. If we stay in the weeds too long, if you do this and then this and then this note and this rhythm, it's like people's eyes glaze over, and it's like theory doesn't do shit for anybody. It's when I sit there and be like, you want to be able to do this, but like then like, yeah, dude. Tomorrow, the next day, future time, hopeful future time, I'm gonna be able to do that, and that is the jet fuel that propels any human out of the darkness almost every single time. When you read any of the self-help stuff, whether you think that stuff is garbage or not, all of those stories start to have a really common and noticeable pattern, which is my life was not great And now look, and here are the fundamental things I changed, which is why I thought it was great that Jessie brings up manifestation. And what do they call it? The secret? Is that what it's called? Or something like that? It's like, it's all sort of like the same shit, but it's literally like, I am choosing, which I wrote here, tomorrow equals hope. I'm striving every single day to make sure that I remember those two things are synonymous. Like, they can't, like, I don't want them to exist in isolation from one another. Like, those two things have to be married to each other for me. Like, I have to look forward to something, or else every time I turn around, I'm in gray nowhere land. So thank you so much for that. And then Tripp speaking to the alchemy of it, it's totally possible. And as a lifelong musician, I'm trying to hurry up and land my plane. I never want to like monologue too long up here, but I've seen it. I've seen people of all walks of life, ages, colors, creeds. When you put on a good show and you're looking out at a sea of people, you're seeing all sorts of people tapping their foot, sipping their sippies. Some are more social than others. Some of them are in the back of the bar, you know, talking with the other D&D dorks or whatever, wishing they were back home doing their campaign, but happy to be there enough to watch the music, like all the different kinds of people. And you watch as someone who's gone through chemotherapy all week comes up to you after a show wearing a rag, clearly going through it, and the tears in their eyes, they say, thank you so much. Like, I so needed this tonight. And then you realize, like, that is magic and it works. And the more we look to that and not care if it's in the DSM-5 or any literature that we can find in the universities, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't pursue it because it's real and I've seen it work a million times. Okay, there, plane has landed. You can put your tray tables back down now.
So I will start by saying that, man, it's just, okay, so actually I'm going to take a moment because we just crossed the hour mark to say thank you everybody who's been sitting in this room and engaging in conversation. I know that there's quite a different conversation, still mental health related, but a lot of comments going back and forth. I am reading. Thank you guys so much for participating. And again, thank you to every single one of these panelists. If anybody in here isn't already following these people, you're doing yourself a disservice, so make sure you correct that before we end this live. Now, like I said, we're a little bit over the hour mark, and I think we're taking to some really great strides here. I think that experience that we can give people with the food, music, or what have you, and can be a really great jumping off point for people to experience just a good time. And if we give people the space to have a good time, and make sure to give them a chance and opportunity to talk to one another. I mean, literally, they could just be as simple as that. And like, I get that it's a nuanced conversation and it doesn't work for everybody. And for instance, different regions are going to respond differently to different types of music. For instance, one of the goals that I have on the grand far horizon of mine is the idea of traveling citizens revival. And one of that is like a concert that I would be hosting for the town or what have you. But it's going to have to kind of fit the vibe of the town. So like, it might be bluegrass in one area and more a hard rock kind of, vibe in another, just kind of depending on where you're at. And so it's those sorts of things. The beauty of the fact that, there's so many options and that we can click and connect in so many different ways is part and parcel for this. So thank you again for being here. I just want to go ahead and open up the conversation to continue any old direction we want to. Yes, go right ahead, Miss Jennie.
Yeah, thanks. So much to say. I'm going to try to organize it, like squeeze it into something comprehensible. If I may get nerdy about the nervous system for a bit, I feel like there's so much in just the little I've heard, like from both Tony, Jessie, and then kind of seeing a little bit of what's happening in the messages, like the comments are going. Everything that everyone said makes so much sense to me, and I'm hoping I could ground it in a little bit of like nervous system science. So basically, one of the things that Jessie and I have been talking about in the last few weeks, especially, really before the election, but like especially after, is kind of seeing like not just like cycles of like historical events or like historical events sort of cycling and like seeing things that we've already seen before, but also sort of the emotions and like energy, etc., associated with this cycle back in. Those things like tend to like, I think they're part and part, like they belong, like they sort of like are in the same group, And so towards that, one of the things that like I think about obsessively in general is generational healing. And right now, I think we're just seeing, like, in my opinion, I think we're just seeing a moment amongst the lots of things we're seeing. There's a moment right now where like we are getting both an opportunity to like heal some of the like anger, the sadness, the grief, the fear, the like whatever intense emotions that are rising again. But once again, and perhaps maybe even, I mean, I can't speak for before, but once again, we're also trying to do so. Like the fact that this is coming up to me indicates like these are things that need to come up and want to be healed. And there's just enough safety for it to come up and not be entirely, not have the collective go like entirely into freeze. That being said, when we do have feelings of anger, especially like the survival kind, I'm still not seeing enough in just how we're going about things and the way that society is structured, frankly, in terms of support. So there's a thing in nervous system work where big emotions, like nothing actually has to turn into trauma. Like trauma is not the event that happens to you. Trauma is what happens when the thing that happens, or when you're not supported when the thing happens to you. So that's like been huge for me. So as I see these kind of like big feelings rise up again, I just want to like put such an emphasis on support and what that looks like. And so to what you were saying earlier, Tripp, about like building community, how do we do it? Another cool thing that I've taken from just like the stuff that I've like the nervous system stuff is that it takes very little for our systems to feel on the systems level, it can take very little to feel safe. For example, that's like one kind look from a stranger. Like that is like, you know, just a how are you, like good day, with someone you don't know. And all of that contributes to something called like, what is it called? Ventral, basically like activates the part of our nervous system that is responsible for connection. And when that's activated, it is very, very hard to be in survival mode. So I know this is kind of like jumbled and maybe like a lot, but I've just been thinking so much about like what are the smallest things that we can do for ourselves, for each other, to seek the connection that we need in our lives and to provide that for like those we love. And it doesn't have to be like a big thing. It could literally be like a text. And when that's done in regular intervals, it does a lot to stabilize a person's system and to help them heal. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for dropping some of that knowledge on us. And you know, there's that kind of that kind of swing between like everybody is uniquely different in the way they experience their traumas and their events and things, and the fact that grand enough, if you stand back far enough, it is all kind of very common and similar. You know what I mean? Like if you don't look at the nuanced details of the situation and you just kind of look at like big things happen, people are not supported, and that causes like negative ripple effects throughout the rest of their lives until they, you know, actually have the time, energy, and, you know, self reflection to do some work to try and heal that. The shadow work and all the things that have been very popularly going around the algorithms for months and months are all still very individualistic, very, you know, to the core, to the one person at a time. And that's not bad, because it all does start with self. Like it does, like, I am the person that I have to spend the most amount of time with. Like, hands down, it's me, ride or die until the end. So, like, I have to be okay with myself. I have to be comfortable with myself in some regard. So it does start here. But after that, or in extension to that, every person we talk to, every communication that we have is a chance to build a richer experience, to build a better community, to build, you know, a common ground and a space that you feel reciprocated appreciation. And I'm not saying that, you know, you can just walk out your front door and the first person you talk to, you guys are gonna be best friends forever and ever. Like it does, you know, it doesn't happen that easily. But if you take the time to, you know, get to know a person and actually try and, you know, have the empathy to hold space for a conversation that, you know, for instance, just, you know, letting them talk about their day in an open fashion that, you know, it may not interest you, but just letting them kind of vent in such a way. And I'm not saying like a therapist or nothing, but, you know, just being sometimes the community can happen in commiseration. Sometimes the community can happen in more positive sorts of ways. But like having the ability to see that and provide it when you can, or even just be able to participate when you see it available to you. Like if you see an event that's going on in your town, go. Go and see, like live life and have the experiences, because you never know what kind of friends you're going to make and what kind of community can exist from that. And so like taking the opportunity is a big piece. Go ahead, Tony, and then Jessie will have you up right after.
When we say get out there and live and do things and make friends and all that, I just want to put an addendum on that, because in light of the fact, for anyone who wasn't here at the beginning, and I read the stat that at least half, and as far as 2019 goes, half of millennials were dealing with some sort of mental health issue, and it was attributed to loneliness and money stress. So we're talking right now essentially about correcting the loneliness piece of it, which is important, which is camaraderie. And in order to effectively do that, we do have to do some of that internal individualized work so that we're not out here fumbling. And sometimes it is in that fumbling that we meet like minds and people who fumbled in that way before. So it's not all bad. We don't have to be perfect before we get out there and help fix this lonely thing. But people will always bring up, well, we're all broke as well. And so how do we do this? How do we live? And I'll tell you that, like, I told Tripp this the other day, and you told me to make a video on it, and I haven't been able to verbalize it. So I'm going to just say it very quickly, is like, oh man, it makes me feel like teary-eyed. I don't own anything. I am in possession of a great many things and memories as well as opportunities, but like they're not mine. I've spent my life loving people and letting them love me back, and we're not always best friends, but we're like people who allowed a connection even in the most unlikely of places. And the guy who owns the house that I've been renting, like him and I are so totally different in so many ways, politically, socially, religiously, but he's a dear friend, and he's taking care of me and my daughter right now, like in ways that have been almost immeasurable beyond finance. And I don't own anything, and I'm in possession of things that enhance my life. And so I think that's the real alchemy, is that we're stuck viewing this entire situation through some weird capitalist modernized lens. And it's like, there's some, and this is straight woo, and I get it, and you can laugh if you want, but there's something else happening that we haven't found a way to measure scientifically yet, or give a name to. And it is when you pour in the right ways and you allow others to pour into you, and we don't become ideologues or stubborn in our ways, and we allow it to thresh us and mold us and change us, you will make beautiful connections that will turn into a support system, even if your bloodline wasn't able to provide that for you. It can happen. It will happen. I've seen it happen for myself and so many other people. So in this space, when we're talking about fixing loneliness and building community and food and music and third spaces, and you're like, well, I still need to be able to afford to get there. And it's like that mentality, I'm telling you, I've been broke my entire adult life, man. I've never been in a place where I'm just like, except for very, very recently. And that's because I had people show me how to manage money and grow businesses, things that we were not taught in school. And that's super recent, and I'm almost 40. So I'm telling anybody in this chat who feels overwhelmed by the lack of opportunities because of finances, is like, start planting human seeds of connection now, not because you're planting a support system, but because you're planting hope for tomorrow and almost a promise of fulfillment. Because people's deathbed, the same thing rings true. It is the people they were close to, the ones who were around them at that time and throughout their life. Like, it's the people that we remember fondly. And the more we become isolated from one another, the faster this all goes away in a real bad way. And that's where I'll land the plane. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Jessie, we're going to have you come on up.
That kind of sent me in a different direction. So a lot of the way that we look at health, mental health, is through the rugged individualism lens. And conversations Jennie and I have been having are like, what collective patterns are we stuck in as a society? What things do we keep playing over and over? And I know this is kind of getting into the nerdy science bit of it, but looking back to the Great Depression and that era, there was a lack of food, resources, and epigenetically, I'm like, is that why, a couple generations later, we're seeing a lot of hoarding of power, hoarding of resources, hoarding of wealth, hoarding of all of these things? So are some of the behaviors that we are seeing in society right now a manifestation of some trauma that happened in our ancestral line? Like, I know that there were over 15 million Europeans that came over prior to World War II. And I found out that I've got a pattern of fleeing from G-slide running down a couple different signs of my lineage. I was born, my mom said I was always a really nervous baby. And that didn't make sense to me. And I was like, what if nervous system dysregulation can be inherited? So what are some of the behaviors we're seeing manifest in society right now? And how can we trace that back to patterns that we're stuck in as a collective, as a hoarding of resources, as a persecution, as things along those lines?
I saw Deborah's hand go up, so go right ahead, dear. Well,
yeah, thanks. I'm going to echo what other people have said too, just because I feel it as well. The nerdy is imperative. It is imperative. We need to keep talking about these things, because I went to school for 12 plus years and to study human development and wellness across the lifespan. I left without a degree because I just kept studying. I was like, I don't care about your paper. I was like, I just want to keep getting all these pieces. And okay, I don't want to get so far off, but it's really important. It's really important, and it's some of my favorite stuff. First, to your point and the generational stuff, there's a great book I read a couple years ago, and I still have a copy. It's called "It Didn't Start With You" by Mark Woolman, something like that. Yeah. I definitely suggest go reading that book, because it also has exercises and practices that you can work with. So it's a kind of a self-help in that way, not just talking about it, but stuff to apply. I have come to understand through my own personal journey, my own exploration of this culture, my own feeling like I'm an alien inside of this box and I don't fit in this world because I don't like so many of these things. I see how they're hurting us. I see how they're dividing us. I see these big picture things, and I look back, I look like, how does this not make sense? Right? It gets frustrated a little bit for me, is how does it not make sense that we just keep doing this stuff? How do people not see that we're just hurting ourselves again and again and again, and dividing ourselves and making ourselves weaker and more scared and more, in many ways, not saying everybody is. In all of the years that I sought understanding and information and practices and my own healing and mental health and things like that, physical health, I have come to understand that radical authenticity is the foundation. And mindfulness, Tony, you were talking about meditation earlier, and I want to just play semantics a little bit, because meditation, and there's a difference, right, between mindfulness and meditation. Mindfulness is something that we carry with us, that we can do all the time, everywhere, in everything. And I have found it's really difficult to find your authentic self unless you are actually spending time with your authentic self. When you live authentically right here and right now, without getting woo-woo about it, this is all you really are right now, because the brain stores memories the same way it stores dreams, the same way it stores movies. We have mirror neurons, so we can watch somebody else go through something and it ends up in our memory as if it was our own thing. So that essentially is the dreamscape. We can't predict the future, so we have no idea when it's coming. And yes, I love this hope piece, right, that keeps us going. I always say curiosity is what keeps this cat alive, because next day could be the best day ever. But only in the here and now can I use my senses. Only in the here and now can I experience my life fully, not in the past and not in the future. I worried so much about trying to get into my past to fix things or heal things until I realized that every bit of my past that I need to access, heal, align, address is here in me, in my nervous system, in my energy patterns, in my habits, in my speech, in my behavior, in my beliefs, in all of it. The only place I need to work is right here and right now. And the only way I'm really going to be able to show up for myself, for community, for any of this stuff is if I am willing to be present even when it's hard. We live in a world that has a million distractions and a million, but social media for some things, video games for some, we can talk about many reasons why they're good and bad and whatnot. But they're also ways to pull us away from what we are actually experiencing. And I think one of the biggest issues with like video games and social media is that instead of me sitting quietly and listening to the birds and just letting my thoughts kind of pass like clouds, like, just a couple generations, like that's what you did. You sat on the porch and watched the sunset. You didn't grab your phone. You didn't have your phone. You weren't scattering your attention among all these other things. And we can argue whether that's by design or not, and for whatever nefarious reasons or not, doesn't matter. We can argue over details all day long. The most important thing is for me to be right here, right now. And when fear comes up, when joy comes up, how do I meet it? Am I willing to be understanding with myself? Am I willing to listen to the emotion instead of pushing it away? Because those are the things that are going to dictate how I treat other people. And I really want to also kind of push off the table this idea that we have to be healed, fixed, better at all, whether it be money or emotional or whatever, to start connecting and building community. Because that loneliness, that mental health, one of the most validating things can be to connect with somebody else who is losing their shit too. I know we can talk about from a million angles, but I don't think it's as complicated as we've been told or that some might want us to believe, because that takes our power away. We're so confused. All these things we've got to figure out. What if we just distilled, and that's not to push away the nerdy stuff because I love the nerdy stuff. What if we just distilled it down to, we are pack animals. We do not thrive on our own. We can survive, but we thrive together. Our nervous systems need each other. We go through these processes. We require each other. So don't be afraid to start connecting. We also need purpose. In elder care, there are some really amazing things in the study of gerontology that are coming out to understand that purpose, when we lose our purpose or when we never find our purpose, we can be lost our entire lives and experience mental illness and anxiety and fight or flight and all of these other things because we don't feel centered and grounded in ourselves and safe in ourselves. We all have basic needs. I like to go over to the hierarchy of needs that was taught to Maslow. We all have these basic needs. We are all very similar. And the only place we exist is in the here and now. And this is the only place we can exist together. That gives me hope. That simplifies it in a way that makes it digestible, applicable, and not so far away like some meditation practices or some energy work or some woo thing or demons or inner demons or angels or whatever. Like all of that is so far out here. I want to just pull us back into like this. This is where we start. This is where it ends too. This is the whole process. So thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Yes, go ahead, Miss Jennie.
Thanks. Thank you so much for what you said. I'm about to like go off on how trauma is essential. Two things. So like I'll talk about the here and now second because that's so important. Like thank you so much. But first, if you allow me to go off on how generational trauma is, as I like to say, transmitted through the ages. Yeah, so like Jesse was saying, 100%. So on the hard science side, what we have clinical data for are like the epigenetic, like how trauma changes the way our genes are regulated and how that gets passed down basically. But one of the biggest things they've found out is cortisol regulation. So when you're talking about nervous system dysregulation, it could be a bunch of stuff, but a lot of it can come down to just like cortisol regulation alone. Which, for example, if you've inherited a set of basically if the package you got is like, oh, I'm really sensitive to like when cortisol is in my body, and that's because like you know in past generations like I needed to be really alert, um but at the same time like I don't metabolize it as much as like according to the context I'm in now. What you could get a case where you're like you kind of feel like you're probably more stressed than you should be, or you're just like really hyper vigilant or something like that. You could also get a version of this where, for example, previous generations have become acclimated to really high levels of cortisol. So you could maybe be like more frozen or react less when there is a threat in your environment. Just it could look like a whole bunch of ways. So the shorthand, well, so that's the hard science that they have. I think they have data. I'm not super up on the clinical studies end of this, but I know through the modality that I work through, which is somatic experiencing, we work through 5 pillars, which is, and this connects to the here and now thing later, which is in no order, it's sensation, images, so that's like visuals. Sensations are just like what you feel in the body. Behaviors, that's kind of like movements. Affect, which is feelings, and then meaning, which is kind of like narrative making, story, like meaning making. Generational trauma can also be passed on through all 5 of these things. So when you're talking like it could be like you feel some kind of like pain in your arm or chest that you don't quite know what that's from. That could be a sign of generational trauma. It could be like, you keep having these recurring dreams of like, I'm making this all up, but it's all stuff that has been seen before. But for example, you keep having, this dream of being chased. Or it's like a behavior like hoarding. It just kind of goes, et cetera, et cetera. And these are the kinds of things that we do as practitioners, at least through that modality, to help people tap into what isn't theirs that they may not even know the origins of. Like your body knows. So the way I think about generational trauma, like the really shorthand of it, is basically if you ever have like a reaction, especially if it's like a survival size reaction that feels disproportionate to your current context, it's probably somebody else's. Like, and that a lot of that came also from that book that you mentioned. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin, and like it completely changed my life. Yeah, so that's the thing. That's my thing about generational trauma. But the thing about the here and now is it's so important. It's so funny because like the entire modality I work through is just helping folks, like supporting folks, helping folks, whatever you want to call it, like access the here and now more. Because in the session itself, if you're doing it right as a practitioner, it'll be a safe container, or at least safe, relatively safe. And so you use the like anchor of the safety in the here and now to help people tap back into stuff in the past. And then like you kind of do this like what we call like basically like titration or pendulation, where it's like you feel a little bit of like something shitty before, and then you feel like, oh, okay, this isn't happening anymore, basically. But the way you do so is exactly how you described it, which is like a lot of it's just through the senses. Also, again, nerdy little bit about trauma. What also changed my life and just figuring out what I like, some of my own stuff, is that out of the 5 pillars I mentioned, sensation, like tactile stuff, tends to be the most it can be the like most grounding type of support, And if you can only be supported by tactile stuff in a certain moment, it's more likely than not the trauma like either is super deep and generational, or it's something that happened to you like in early development. Because basically the other stuff, like like sensation and like tactile stuff, is the one of the first things to develop in like human development. And so it's one of the first things that like we know to regulate us. It's one of the first signals that stuff is wrong. Like all the other stuff come later. So yeah, anyway. That's an ADHD scattered little fact. But yeah,
That's
like
awesome.
sensory stuff, just this stuff saves lives. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, thank you for that contribution, because like there's so many facets to this. There's like, you know, it's like layers and layers. There is the scientific, like actual, like what is physically happening under the microscope and what have you, and in that way there's still the like the chemical changes, the brain things, as well as like these have kind of like experiences and things have lasting effects upon the body and things like that. There are, and that's, you know, I mean, that can be a whole nother conversation. Unfortunately, we have wound up to last words already. We've hit the hour and a half mark. It's been a wonderful conversation that has taken many different directions. And now we are here towards the last little bits. What I will say is that for this particular piece of the overall conversation that we have been having through these live panels, it's important to recognize that we have this kind of connectedness to us. You know, that, you know, these traumas, these things that happen, you know, whether they're passed down through generations or they happen fresh for us, like it is events like this must be understood on many different levels, whether it be like, you know, down to the nitty gritty science, like under the microscope, or to the spiritual, you know, the woo woo, as we have been calling it, this idea that we have, you know, there's something outside of ourselves that is, you know, energy and these kinds of things that we may not fully understand, but we definitely feel its presence. And many more other ways that this particular part of the conversation matters. So what I'll say to kind of kick us off for last words, of course, I'll be the one ending it, but to start us off, I want to say it's most important that we really get down to brass tacks. What we're really talking about when we're talking about creating community is having friends. And like, you know, it starts with conversation. It starts with, you know, being, you know, putting yourself in a position where you feel comfortable to have said conversation. But like, we're really just trying to you know, have some sort of intro towards a community that feels natural to people of our age. You know, the mindset that we may be more ready to spout our tea and our drama and stuff here online than we are to go sit with people at the park and talk about the weather or what have you, because that just seems too boring, too passé. But that's right. That's what we used to do, and we were a lot better for it. So on that note, we're just going to go ahead and go down the line and start off with some last words. Again, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who's been here today. I really appreciate having conversations like this. Go ahead, Miss Reverend Deborah.
Thank you again for inviting me to this panel, for everybody here. I really love the space that you hold. And for last words, I am in the active process still, and again, of building physical community, online community, as well as in-person community. And in that process, I'm speaking with my online community about what that might look like, about how we conceptualize of living our lives in a different way. And sometimes it's hard because we've been doing these things for so long, and we try to like recreate different versions of it, so to speak. But I really encourage everyone who is interested in changing the paradigm, like really like this new earth stuff, right? Essentially, like we're like, yeah, get out of this box of these unhealthy patterns that we are collectively in. I encourage everyone to really reach outside of what you know for something novel, for something that might seem radical, but feels really inclusive. I think I'd like to leave with just this thought. If I'm trying to direct my energy more toward community mindedness, I need to make sure that my decisions are inclusive decisions. Not every decision is going to be able to be inclusive, but I do it with myself as well. Is this inclusive of all my parts, or is it exclusive in some way for some reason? Inclusive community might look like, again, somebody's having a problem. We bring them in and everyone in the community gets involved in helping them resolve, right? Being able to show up authentically means including all of my parts and not excluding the things I'm afraid to share that might look messy sometimes. But can we imagine a world where our most basic needs are met in a way that is actually supportive and brings us toward our self-actualization? I've always had an inner knowing, an inner feeling that it's absolutely possible. I know that we have to do it in radical ways that feel radical. So yeah, think way outside the box.
Too true. Absolutely too true. Thank you, my friend. Miss Jennie, thank you so much for coming up again. And I appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped on us. Thanks for being here.
Okay, is this the last words bit? Okay.
This is the last words bit, yes.
So hard to condense everything. Yeah, I think yeah, so actually, like, I totally credit Jessie for opening my mind to all this in the last few weeks, especially. But I think in terms of, if I look at how my understanding has changed and developed of society, like how we get to a place of more basically equity and everything nice, in the last like 5-ish years, it's gone to a place, it started more in a place of like, oh, like believing, it's fun, it's kind of funny for me to think about this now, but like believing that corporatocracy could do some good, that it may not be the end all be all, but like there's value in it. And then that kind of like melted into like wanting to like that we could make a lot of change through, or we could change like systems fundamentally by like mobilizing politically, which like that's not true. But then over time, just and the last iteration of this before I got into trauma work, and this is kind of what sparked it, is that unless we resolve the trauma, especially like the generational collective cycles, we will keep ending up in this spot that we're in weirder and more interesting ways. But unless there's something underneath it that I think we're finally starting to talk about, that has kept us from actually progressing societally. But now in the last few weeks, and this is a part where I credit Jessie for, I think what it really comes down to is consciousness raising. Whether or not, like I think like trauma work is just a particular slice of that. There's something about like, yeah, there's something about us being able to meet each other as people, meet ourselves, and yeah, be able to like build, like be able to kind of like key into this collective energy, instead of like thinking that we are all like individuals in this weird like it's standing side by side but without like a broader umbrella to it all. Hopefully that makes sense, but I am big on just whatever it is that like raises self-awareness and collective awareness at this point. Because I think that's what's going to really, like, that is the foundational piece. Let me know if you know the thing under it, because there might be. But that's as deep as I got in this like little tower of things.
I feel you. It's a puzzle and a conundrum to tackle for sure, as on a collective level. Jessie, thank you again for being here and adding such amazing insight. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple things. My final thoughts are, to be a better community member, the first thing I ask is, what part do I play in this system? In this system that we live in right now, what is my part by position of my identity, just so that I know what I'm carrying with me and also where I might have the ability to make some movement. The second part is looking at burnout. I've been thinking more about that as moral injury, and the fact that every time I have significantly experienced burnout, it's been when I've been doing things that are out of alignment with what feels good at my soul. So going back to the radical authenticity, moving more away from what they're asking and trying to figure out ways to create a life that feels fulfilling to me. And that requires the third thing is imagination. What do we want the collective future to look like? And Hannah Arendt, who wrote about the banality of evil, she was a philosopher. Actually, she said, I don't classify myself as a philosopher because they don't do anything. You have to actually put your boots on the ground. But she said, fundamentally, Lord, forgive them. They know not what they do. And the interviewer brought that up and she said, I fundamentally have a trust in humanity, which is difficult to formulate, but fundamentally, I believe that I have a trust in humanity. Otherwise, there would be no reason for us to exist. So, thank you.
That is, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was great. Some great last words. Tony, thank you so much for making this one. I really appreciate you being here. Yeah, thanks, man.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Let me begin by saying, as a daughter dad, I am honored to be in this panel of ladies. I hope that I hope she's like you in her own way. You guys are all inspiring. You guys, you can tell I'm too much of a dude. You dudes are freaking awesome, man, and I just really appreciate you. And I want to say something that didn't get brought up tonight, because I think talking about community is really, really important. But one of the things that I think is woefully not discussed is gut health. The gut is the only other place in the body that has neurons, and it doesn't get talked about enough. The brain and the gut all day, every single day, are communicating. And when we don't give this thing and the right things to speak with this thing, we can't be surprised that we're not okay sometimes. And I think that we shouldn't end this panel without at least mentioning that. So watch what you eat. If you don't know anything about it, look into gut health, the gut microbiome. There are no quick fixes. Truly addressing gut health is a process. And it's not some start taking this fucking $100 shit and you'll be great. Maybe it'll help, but so that's an aside there. As far as mental health goes, they always say it's okay to not be okay. They'll say that, you're not alone. And if you're anything like me, I'm too much of a rock and roller sometimes for that shit. And it doesn't hit the same as someone taking the time for you in a real, transparent, and vulnerable way. It's more powerful than a slogan or a bumper sticker. Not that any of those things are bad. Better than any pill someone ever tried to give me. Better than a doobie, honestly, which has always been one of my favorite things. But time, someone giving me time to hear me out and to not look at me like I'm insane has always, and I'm assuming will always be, the single most powerful thing that has allowed me to shift my life in new ways, right? To create new reality paradigms for me to live in. And because that has happened to me and was given to me so many times in my life, I do that. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create those spaces for people. And I met Tripp because I tried to do it in a political space. And I think any of us who were trying to do that goal, the healing work, as it were, in political spaces and trying to bridge divides and stuff, will tell you it's not always a good fucking time at all. So, I appreciate this space. I appreciate everyone who comes to it and is patient with people who might even speak differently or think differently than you. It is the way out, even though nobody has a clear path drawn out to the fire escape in this situation. we're never going to if we don't calm down, communicate, and try to collectively see a way out of this hellscape that so many of us seem to be trapped in. Because again, like I said at the beginning, the stats will show almost half of millennials dealing with mental health issues, yet deaths from substance abuse shot up 108% in the decade previous to that, which means, yeah, sure, those are the ones that went to therapy or are diagnosed, but what about the ones who didn't? Be an ear for somebody, quit being a dick on the internet, and quit being a dick in real life. Me, you, and everybody. Like, so many of us need help, and an encouraging word and a few moments of someone's unbiased time and non-judgmental time could not only save someone's life, but that one small act of kindness could be one in a chain of infinite acts of kindness that could actually fucking guide humanity in a sweet direction instead of a continuously dystopian nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Absolutely thank you. All right. And with that, that's last words. I want to thank everybody one more time on the panel and just say you guys were wonderful. Thank you for being here and sharing space with me. And on that note, goodbye. Goodbye. Bye-bye now. We never know what an interaction will lead to, you know, whether that be positive or negative. A compliment or a rude comment can inevitably send somebody on a completely different path, and that's important. I always choose kindness, like literally 99.97% of the time. So don't get me wrong, I'm human. There's sometimes when the a-hole will come out first, but I usually feel extremely bad, like instantly. But to choose kindness, because we don't know how big it could affect a person. You know what I mean? Like that compliment could radically change their whole worldview just because, you know, we never know what another person's going through. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as we go forward. And the idea that the people around you, whether you like it or not, can be a community and can lead to some really good things if we're able to exist in that space together. So try to go out, make a few friends in real life, and see where that can lead you. I am personally of the belief that if we connect on ways, I've been connected to some very amazing, inspirational people, both here online and in real life, that have moved me in very unique and different ways. And I'm stepping through my life accordingly because I've been inspired by so many. So we'll be having it again very soon. But until next time, be well, fellow citizens. Genuinely, thank you for being here.